when a police dog suddenly dragged a girl out of the park. Onlookers were frozen in shock. What appeared to be an aggressive animal attack would soon reveal itself as something far more extraordinary. Within seconds, the crowd's horrified gasps transformed into screams of a completely different nature. No one could have predicted what the trained K9 had sensed that day, something invisible to human eyes, but potentially catastrophic. It was a picture-perfect Saturday afternoon at Willow Creek Park. Families sprawled across the lush green lawns, the sound of children's laughter floating through the air as parents chatted nearby. 8-year-old Lily skipped along the edge of the playground, her blonde pigtails bouncing with each step as she collected colorful pebbles near an old oak tree. What no one noticed was how the ground beneath her feet seemed slightly different. Darker, more uneven than the rest of the area. Officer Martinez and his K9 partner Rex were making their routine patrol around the perimeter, the German shepherd trotting obediently at his handler's side. But as they rounded the corner near the playground, Rex's demeanor suddenly shifted. His ears perked up, his body stiffened, and a low whine escaped his throat. Officer Martinez checked his surroundings, seeing nothing out of the ordinary, just families enjoying the weekend sunshine. But what started as a normal day was about to turn into something no one at the park could have imagined. Officer Martinez tugged gently on Rex's leash, attempting to redirect the dog's attention. "Come on, boy," he urged. But Rex remained fixated on something in the distance, his training seemingly forgotten. The German shepherd's body language had shifted dramatically. From relaxed patrol mode to high alert in mere seconds. His ears stood perfectly erect, swiveling slightly as if tracking an invisible sound. "Is everything okay, officer?" a concerned mother asked, noticing the dog's strange behavior. She pulled her toddler closer instinctively, maternal protection kicking in at the sight of the suddenly tense police dog. "Just a routine check," Martinez replied, though confusion was evident in his voice. In 6 years of service together, Rex had never disobeyed a command. The bond between handler and K9 was built on thousands of hours of training, countless patrols, and mutual trust that had been forged through dangerous situations. Martinez knew every subtle communication signal Rex typically displayed. This was something entirely different. The German shepherd's muscles tensed beneath his sleek coat, rippling with barely contained energy. His nose worked frantically, sampling the air with increasing urgency, nostrils flaring wide as he processed something imperceptible to human senses. A low, rumbling growl began deep in his chest, not aggressive, but alerting. Martinez recognized this as Rex's signal for detecting something potentially dangerous. "Rex, report," Martinez commanded, firmly, using their training language to try to understand what the dog was sensing. But instead of the usual response, sitting and maintaining eye contact, Rex's attention remained locked on something across the playground. Then, without warning, he pulled with such force that the leather leash slipped through Martinez's fingers, burning slightly against his palm as it escaped his grasp. The sudden break from protocol sent a jolt of adrenaline through the officer's system. "Rex, stand down," the officer commanded sharply. But the dog was already moving with singular purpose toward the playground, specifically toward little Lily, who remained blissfully unaware as she arranged her collection of colorful stones beneath the ancient oak tree. Her small fingers worked methodically, organizing the pebbles by size and hue, completely absorbed in her innocent play. Martinez broke into a run, following his partner while simultaneously reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Martinez at Willow Creek Park. My K9 has broken command and is approaching civilians. Stand by for further information." The dispatcher's voice crackled back with acknowledgement as he sprinted across the grass. Parents began pulling their children closer, sensing something was wrong. Some grabbed their belongings, preparing for a quick exit. Others stood frozen, watching the scene unfold with growing concern. A few pulled out phones, recording the unusual police activity. The officer's heart raced as he tried to close the distance between himself and Rex. The dog was moving with purpose, but not aggression. Martinez knew the difference intimately. Rex wasn't displaying the posture of an attack, but rather the focused determination of a rescue mission. Still, a 70-pound German Shepherd moving at full speed toward a child was enough to trigger alarm in anyone watching. "Everyone stay calm," Martinez called out, trying to maintain order while still keeping his eyes locked on Rex. "My dog is trained. Please give him space." What the handler didn't know, what no human present could possibly know, was that his canine partner was sensing something that their limited human perception couldn't detect. Rex's specialized training and heightened canine senses had picked up on a danger that remained invisible to everyone else in the park that sunny afternoon. And with each passing second, the invisible threat was growing more imminent. As Rex closed in on Lily, time seemed to slow. The little girl finally looked up, her eyes widening at the sight of the police dog racing toward her. Her small mouth opened in surprise, dropping the colorful pebbles she'd been admiring. Martinez was still 20 yards away, too far to intervene, watching helplessly as his partner closed in on the child. What would happen next would change everyone's understanding of what had actually been unfolding beneath their feet all along. In that split second before Rex reached Lily, the world seemed to hold its breath. The playground fell silent, save for the pounding of Officer Martinez's boots against the earth and the rapid panting of his canine partner. Parents froze mid-conversation, children paused in their play, and even the birds overhead appeared to halt their songs, as if nature itself sensed the gravity of what was about to unfold. Lily's eyes grew wide with fear as the German Shepherd bounded toward her. She instinctively raised her small arms to shield herself, dropping her collection of pebbles that scattered across the darkened patch of ground. The colorful stones, blues, reds, and purples she had spent the afternoon carefully selecting, tumbled from her grasp and rolled across the subtly uneven surface beneath the oak tree's dappled shade. "Lily!" Her name echoed across the park as several voices called out in alarm, but no one was close enough to intervene. What happened next occurred so quickly that witnesses would later give conflicting accounts. Rex reached the girl, but instead of attacking, he gently but firmly clamped his jaws around the fabric of her yellow sundress. The dog's training was evident in the precise pressure he applied, enough to grip the material securely without harming the child's skin underneath. With a powerful sideways motion that displayed his muscular strength, he pulled Lily away from her spot beneath the oak tree, dragging her several feet across the grass. His movements were deliberate and controlled, the product of thousands of hours of specialized training. "No!" screamed Lily's mother, Sarah, who had been chatting with another parent nearby. She ran toward her daughter, terror etched across her face, her coffee cup tumbling forgotten to the ground. Her mind raced with horrific possibilities. Rabid dog, training gone wrong, her daughter being mauled before her eyes. "Get away from her!" she shouted, her voice breaking with panic. Other parents rushed forward as well, some pulling out phones to call for help, others looking for anything that might serve as a weapon to fend off what they perceived as an animal attack. An elderly man grabbed a nearby branch, while a teenage boy picked up his skateboard, both ready to defend the child from what they misunderstood as aggression. Officer Martinez finally reached them, his hand moving to Rex's collar with practiced precision. "Rex, release!" he commanded, his voice carrying the authority that came from years of partnership with the animal. Immediately, the dog let go of the dress, standing at attention but still positioned protectively between Lily and the spot where she had been playing. His posture was rigid, alert, his dark eyes fixed on the ground with unwavering focus. The little girl scrambled to her feet, tears streaming down her face as she ran into her mother's arms. "The dog pulled me. He pulled me, Mommy," she sobbed, burying her face in her mother's shoulder, her small body trembling with fear and confusion. Sarah wrapped her arms tightly around her daughter, shooting an accusatory glance at Officer Martinez. "What the hell is wrong with your dog?" a man in a baseball cap demanded, stepping forward aggressively. "That animal should be muzzled if it can't be controlled." Martinez raised a placating hand while kneeling beside his partner, checking the dog's behavior. Years of working with Rex had taught him to read the animal's body language like a book. This wasn't aggression or disobedience. Rex wasn't displaying the bared teeth or raised hackles that would indicate a threat. Instead, he was exhibiting the alert posture from his hazard detection training. Ears forward, body tense but controlled, eyes focused intently on a specific area. "Sir, please step back," Martinez said with calm authority. "My dog is highly trained for detection work." The officer's gaze moved to the ground where Lily had been sitting, noticing for the first time how the soil appeared disturbed, darker than the surrounding area. There was a slight depression, barely perceptible unless you were looking for it. A subtle warning sign that most humans would overlook. "Detection? What are you talking about? There's nothing," the man began, but his words were cut short by a new sound. A low rumbling sound began to emerge from beneath the earth, starting as a barely audible vibration, but quickly growing in intensity. It was a deep, ominous groaning, the sound of earth shifting, of stability giving way to void. Small pebbles on the ground began to dance with the vibration. Martinez's training kicked in immediately. "Everyone back! Move away from this area now!" he shouted, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of urgent command. He began waving people away from the oak tree, creating a perimeter with broad sweeps of his arms. "Clear the area. Move to the parking lot." Some people responded instantly to the authority in his voice, grabbing children and belongings and retreating. Others hesitated, confusion evident on their faces. There was no visible danger, nothing to run from. A few even pulled out phones, recording the unusual scene unfolding before them. "I said move!" Martinez shouted again, more forcefully this time. Before anyone could react further, the ground where Lily had been sitting moments before collapsed inward with a sickening crack that echoed across the park. The surface buckled, then gave way entirely as a sinkhole, previously hidden beneath a thin crust of soil, opened up, 6 feet across and of indeterminate depth. The ancient oak tree, which had stood for perhaps 100 years or more, tilted precariously as its root system was partially exposed, thick, gnarled roots now dangling into empty space. Chunks of earth continued to break away at the edges, the hole growing larger with each passing second. Gasps of horror turned to cries of astonishment as the crowd realized what had happened. What would have happened if Rex hadn't acted. The reality of the situation hit them like a physical force. The little girl would have been swallowed by the earth, potentially falling dozens of feet into darkness with little chance of immediate rescue. My baby. Lily's mother clutched her daughter tighter, staring at the gaping hole in the earth, her face ashen with the realization of how close they had come to tragedy. She couldn't finish the sentence, the words catching in her throat as she imagined the unthinkable alternative outcome. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked toward Officer Martinez and Rex, her expression transforming from anger to profound gratitude. Officer Martinez ran his hand along Rex's back, the reality of the situation sinking in. The dog had sensed what no human could. The hollow space beneath the ground, the imminent collapse, the danger to the child. "Good boy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Good boy, Rex." The German shepherd leaned into his touch briefly before returning his attention to the growing hazard, his training never allowing him to fully relax while a threat remained. As park visitors gathered at a safe distance, murmurs of amazement spread through the crowd. "Did you see that? The dog knew. How could he possibly have sensed it?" Phones were raised, capturing the aftermath of what had nearly been a tragedy, but was now transforming into an extraordinary story of canine intuition and heroism. Social media would soon be flooded with videos of the incident, capturing the moment when disaster was averted by the instincts of a police dog. Martinez radioed for emergency services, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "Dispatch, this is Officer Martinez at Willow Creek Park. We have a sinkhole approximately 6 feet in diameter and growing. Need fire department, city engineers, and additional units for crowd control. No injuries to report." He paused, looking at Rex with pride. "Thanks to my partner." "Copy that, Officer Martinez. Emergency services are being dispatched to your location. ETA 5 minutes, came the response. Rex stood vigilantly by his side, his duty fulfilled, but his attention still focused on ensuring no one else approached the dangerous sinkhole. Occasionally, he would emit a low warning growl when someone ventured too close to the perimeter Martinez had established. Sarah approached cautiously, still holding Lily tightly in her arms. "Officer," she began, her voice quavering slightly. I don't know how to thank you. And your dog. If he hadn't..." She trailed off, unable to articulate the alternative. Martinez nodded understandingly. "Rex was just doing what he's trained to do, ma'am. He can detect changes in terrain that humans can't perceive. Something about the ground composition must have alerted him to the danger." Lily, her fear now subsiding, peered curiously at Rex from the safety of her mother's embrace. "He knew the ground was going to fall?" she asked, her young mind trying to process what had happened. "That's right," Martinez said, softening his tone for the child. "Rex has special abilities that help keep people safe. That's his job." As if understanding he was being discussed, Rex glanced briefly at the girl before returning his attention to the sinkhole, which continued to widen as more soil crumbled into the mysterious cavity below. In the distance, sirens wailed as emergency vehicles approached. Park visitors were now being directed to the parking lots by newly arrived patrol officers, though many lingered, captivated by the unfolding scene. News vans began to arrive, reporters already crafting headlines about the heroic police dog who had saved a child from certain tragedy. What no one yet realized was that this was just the beginning of a mystery that ran far deeper than the cavity that had opened beneath their feet. The sinkhole wasn't a random geological event, and as city engineers would soon discover, it connected to something that had remained hidden beneath Willow Creek Park for decades. Something that would change the town's understanding of its own history and raise questions about what other secrets might be lying just beneath the surface of their seemingly ordinary community. As emergency vehicles crowded the park entrance, their flashing lights casting rhythmic red and blue patterns across the gathering crowd, a sense of organized chaos descended upon the scene. Fire trucks, police cruisers, and a city utilities van formed a protective perimeter around the growing sinkhole. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the early evening breeze, creating an artificial boundary between the curious public and the mysterious cavity that had nearly claimed a child's life. Fire Chief Donovan, a veteran of 30 years with the department, approached the edge of the collapse with measured steps. His weathered face, lined with the experiences of countless emergencies, creased with concern as he studied the widening aperture. The salt and pepper mustache that had become his trademark twitched slightly as he assessed the situation, mentally calculating risks and resources. "We're going to need structural engineers," he announced, gesturing toward the tilting oak tree whose massive root system now dangled precariously over the void. "And someone from the Geological Survey. This isn't typical for our region." His voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed in crisis situations. Martinez stood nearby, Rex still at attention by his side. The officer had given his preliminary report, but found himself unable to leave, drawn to the mystery unfolding before them. The hole had grown to nearly 12 feet in diameter, with no signs of stabilizing. Occasionally, another chunk of earth would break free and tumble into the darkness below, the sound of its impact oddly muffled, as if falling onto something other than solid ground. "Officer Martinez?" A woman in a dark blue jacket approached, extending her hand. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore sturdy boots that suggested she was no stranger to field work. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Chen, city geologist. I'd like to hear exactly what happened before the ground gave way." Martinez shook her hand, noting the firm grip. "My K9 partner detected something wrong with the ground where the little girl was playing. He broke protocol to pull her away, and moments later, the ground collapsed." As Martinez recounted the events in greater detail, Dr. Chen's expression grew increasingly puzzled. She knelt at the edge of the safety perimeter, studying the soil composition with practiced eyes. She removed a small trowel from her equipment bag and scraped at the edge of the hole, examining the layers of earth revealed by the collapse. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, more to herself than to Martinez. "The bedrock in this area should be stable limestone. We shouldn't be seeing sinkholes here." She rubbed the soil between her fingers, frowning at its composition. "And the stratification is all wrong. These layers have been disturbed, but not recently. Decades ago, at least." She pulled a small device from her bag, a ground-penetrating radar unit, and began taking readings, walking carefully around the perimeter of the hole. The digital display flickered with data as she moved, her expression growing more concerned with each step. "There's a cavity extending well beyond the visible collapse," she said after a moment, looking up at Chief Donovan and Martinez. "Something large underneath. The readings suggest a void approximately 40 feet by 60 feet, possibly larger." She pointed to the screen, though the complex imagery meant little to the others present. By now, Lily and her mother had been escorted to a safe distance, though the little girl kept looking back at Rex with a mixture of fear and fascination. Her small hand clutched her mother's tightly as she whispered questions about the magic dog who had saved her life. Other children gathered nearby whispered excitedly about the heroic dog, already embellishing the story in the way that children do, transforming Rex into a superhero with special powers in their animated retellings. Sarah, Lily's mother, was speaking with a crisis counselor who had arrived on scene, her face still pale with the realization of how close she had come to losing her daughter. Occasionally, she would glance toward Officer Martinez and his dog with an expression of profound gratitude that transcended any need for words. A firefighter named Rodriguez approached the edge with a powerful flashlight, carefully securing himself with a safety line before aiming its beam into the darkness below. What had appeared to be simply dirt and broken roots from above revealed something entirely unexpected when illuminated from a better angle. The light revealed not just loose soil and rock, but something else. Something manufactured. "Chief," he called out, his voice tight with surprise. "You need to see this." The gathered officials crowded around, careful to maintain a safe distance from the unstable edge. Chief Donovan took the offered flashlight and directed its beam downward, his eyebrows rising in surprise at what it revealed. The beam illuminated what appeared to be concrete and metal beneath the natural soil layer. Not the remnants of an old foundation or pipeline, but something more deliberate, more engineered. The beam caught the reflection of what looked like reinforced concrete, weathered but intact, with metal structural elements visible where the earth had fallen away. "Is that a ceiling?" Dr. Chen asked, incredulity evident in her voice as she peered over the edge. "That's not infrastructure piping or an old foundation. That looks like the roof of a structure." Chief Donovan turned to the city manager, Alan Prescott, who had just arrived on scene, looking harried in his rumpled suit. "We need to expand the evacuation zone and get a specialized team in here. This isn't a natural sinkhole. There's a structure underneath this park." Prescott's face paled. "A structure? What kind of structure?" "That's what we need to find out," Donovan replied grimly. "But whatever it is, it's large, it's man-made, and no one apparently knew it was here." As word spread among the officials, hushed conversations broke out. The park had been established in the 1950s, converted from undeveloped woodland according to all city records. There shouldn't be anything man-made beneath it, certainly nothing of this scale. "I've been with the city planning office for 20 years, Prescott said, shaking his head in disbelief. "There's nothing in any of our records about underground structures in this area. Nothing." A senior firefighter named Jenkins approached, his face grave. "Chief, I've been thinking. The timing of this park's establishment, the 1950s. Could this be some kind of Cold War bunker? Civil defense built a lot of structures back then that weren't always properly documented." The suggestion sent a ripple of speculation through the gathered officials. The Cold War era had seen a flurry of bunker and shelter construction, some of it done with minimal oversight or record-keeping in the name of national security. Martinez felt Rex tense beside him, the dog's attention still unwavering from the hole. The German shepherd's ears were forward, his posture alert but not aggressive. He was still sensing something that the humans around him could not perceive. The officer's instincts, honed through years of police work, told him this was just the beginning of something much larger than a simple rescue. "Sir," he said to the chief, "I'd like to remain assigned to this situation." He glanced down at Rex. "My partner is still alerting to something. His training includes detection of various hazards, structural instability, certain chemicals, even some biological agents. If there's something dangerous down there, he might be our best early warning system." Chief Donovan nodded, his eyes still fixed on the mysterious structure below. "I think that's wise, officer. Your partner there has better instincts than all our equipment combined." He turned to address the growing team of emergency responders. "I want structural engineers on site within the hour. Get the urban search and rescue team mobilized with their equipment. We need to know what we're dealing with before we make any moves to explore further." As the sun began to set over Willow Creek Park, powerful floodlights were erected around the site, bathing the scene in harsh white light that created long, dramatic shadows. The crowd of onlookers had grown despite attempts to clear the area, drawn by social media reports of the dramatic rescue and the mysterious discovery. Local news crews had arrived, reporters doing live stand-ups at the edge of the police perimeter, speculating about what might lie beneath the community park. We're live at Willow Creek Park, where what began as a heroic rescue by a police dog has turned into a mysterious discovery. One reporter announced into her microphone, her cameraman capturing the flurry of emergency activity behind her. Sources tell us that what initially appeared to be a sinkhole may actually be the roof of a previously unknown underground structure. City officials have yet to comment on what this structure might be or how long it has been here. No one noticed the elderly man watching from the edge of the parking lot, his face pale with recognition. He stood apart from the other spectators, his weathered hands gripping the handle of a walking cane so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. His eyes, still sharp despite his 80-plus years, took in the scene with a mixture of dread and resignation. No one saw him turn away, hands trembling as he pulled out an ancient flip phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to use. "It's happening," he said simply when the call connected, his voice barely above a whisper. "They've found it." The response from the other end of the line was brief, but it sent the old man hurrying to his car with surprising agility for his age. As he slid behind the wheel of his meticulously maintained 1970s sedan, his mind raced back through decades of secrets kept, of oaths sworn in another lifetime, of contingency plans made for a day he'd prayed would never come. Back at the sinkhole, Dr. Chen had set up additional equipment, working methodically to map the extent of the underground anomaly. Her ground-penetrating radar was now supplemented by seismic sensors placed strategically around the perimeter. She studied the readings with growing confusion, occasionally consulting with a colleague via video call on her tablet. "I'm picking up electrical current," she announced with disbelief, looking up from her instruments. "Whatever's down there, it's powered." She turned the display so Chief Donovan could see the unmistakable electromagnetic signature. "This isn't residual energy or battery backup. There's an active power source." A hush fell over the officials gathered nearby as the implications sank in. Not just a forgotten bunker or abandoned infrastructure, but something that had somehow maintained power for what must have been decades. Could it be connected to the city grid? Prescott asked, his voice strained. "Some kind of error in the utility maps?" Dr. Chen shook her head. "The signature doesn't match municipal power. It's something else, something self-contained." She hesitated before adding, "And there's more. The thermal imaging is showing temperature differentials consistent with environmental control systems, heating or cooling, actively maintaining conditions inside." Chief Donovan's expression darkened. "Are you telling me there could be people down there?" "I'm not ruling anything out at this point," Dr. Chen replied carefully. "But these readings suggest systems designed for long-term operation, not just forgotten equipment that's somehow still running." Martinez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Rex had saved Lily from falling into the hole. But what if the danger wasn't just the physical collapse? What if whatever lay beneath the park presented other hazards? Biological, chemical, radiological. The Cold War had produced no shortage of dangerous research facilities and storage sites. "I think we need to contact federal authorities," he suggested quietly to Chief Donovan. "If this is some kind of classified facility, we might be dealing with more than just a structural hazard." The chief nodded grimly. "Already made the call. FBI and Department of Energy representatives are en route. Until they arrive, we maintain the perimeter and continue non-invasive assessment only. No one goes near that opening." As if to emphasize his point, another section of earth crumbled away from the edge of the hole, revealing more of the concrete structure beneath. This time, something else became visible, what appeared to be lettering or symbols embedded in the concrete. though partially obscured by dirt and decades of concealment. Dr. Chen directed her assistants to aim lights at the newly exposed section, then used a telephoto lens to capture clear images of the markings without approaching the unstable edge. "Can you make it out?" Donovan asked, peering at her camera display. She zoomed in on the digital image, enhancing and sharpening until the characters became legible. Her breath caught as she read aloud. "Project Kronos, 1952, authorized personnel only." The name meant nothing to those gathered, but the date confirmed their suspicions about the Cold War origins of the structure. What remained unexplained was how a facility of this size could have remained hidden and apparently operational for over 70 years, directly beneath a public park in the middle of their community. After more than 60 years buried, beneath the peaceful community park, the secret beneath Willow Creek was about to be revealed. A secret that some had worked very hard to keep hidden, and others had been waiting decades to uncover. As night fell completely, the floodlights cast the scene in an otherworldly glow. The ordinary park transformed into the center of a mystery that would soon draw attention far beyond the boundaries of their small city. In the darkness beyond the lights, Rex's ears suddenly pricked forward, his attention shifting from the hole to the surrounding woods. Martinez noticed immediately, his hand moving instinctively to the weapon at his hip. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, following the dog's gaze into the shadows between the trees. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, a flash of something that didn't belong among the natural patterns of the forest. Then it was gone, leaving him with only questions and a growing sense that the discovery beneath Willow Creek Park was just the beginning of a much larger story, one that had been patiently waiting all these years to be told. By midnight, Willow Creek Park had transformed into something resembling a military operation. The perimeter had been expanded to encompass the entire recreational area, with police barricades and armed officers turning away curious onlookers who continued to arrive despite the late hour. News vans lined the street outside, their satellite dishes raised like mechanical flowers seeking signal in the darkness. Local reporters stood in front of camera lights, their breath visible in the cool night air as they delivered updates to a community that had awakened to find itself at the center of a growing mystery. The playground where children had been swinging just hours earlier now sat abandoned in eerie silence. The yellow police tape fluttering around its perimeter, a stark contrast to the cheerful primary colors of the equipment. The picnic area where families had gathered for weekend barbecues had been commandeered as a staging ground for equipment and personnel. Folding tables now covered with maps, monitoring devices, and communication equipment instead of checkered tablecloths and paper plates. Martinez remained on site, having been officially assigned to the investigation due to Rex's unique capabilities and their involvement in the initial discovery. He had called home to explain his extended shift to his wife, Maria, who had grown accustomed to the unpredictable hours of police work over their 15 years of marriage. The dog had finally settled into a resting position at Martinez's feet, though his alert posture suggested he was far from relaxed. Occasionally, his ears would prick up at some sound imperceptible to human hearing, his dark eyes scanning the perimeter with unwavering vigilance. "Officer Martinez?" A woman in a dark suit approached, flanked by two men with the unmistakable bearing of federal agents. Her stride was purposeful, her expression professionally neutral, as she navigated the organized chaos of the emergency response. "I'm Special Agent Diana Blackwood, FBI." She flashed credentials briefly before continuing, the gold badge catching the light of the temporary floodlights. "I understand you and your K-9 partner were first on scene." Martinez nodded, rising to greet her. He noted the crisp precision of her appearance. Dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, suit impeccably pressed despite the late hour, not a detail out of place. Yes, ma'am. Rex alerted to the ground instability before anyone else noticed anything wrong. If not for him, we would have had a tragedy on our hands. Blackwood studied the German shepherd with professional interest, her eyes taking in the animal's muscular build and attentive posture. What's his specialty? Multi-purpose. Patrol, tracking, and hazard detection. He's certified for structural collapse, certain chemical agents, and explosives. Martinez couldn't keep the pride from his voice as he added, "He's one of only 3 dogs in the state with his level of certification." "Impressive," she remarked, though her tone remained neutral. "I'd like you to walk me through exactly what happened, from the beginning. Every detail, even those that might seem insignificant." As Martinez recounted the events for what felt like the dozenth time, he observed Blackwood carefully. Unlike the local officials, who had reacted with surprise and confusion, the FBI agent seemed almost expectant. Her questions were too precise, her focus too directed. It was as if the discovery was somehow anticipated, or at least the possibility of it had been prepared for. She didn't display the shocked disbelief that had characterized everyone else's reaction to the finding of an unknown underground facility. "And the girl, Lily, she's unharmed?" Blackwood asked, making a note on a small electronic tablet with a stylus. "Yes. Frightened, but physically fine. Her mother took her home about 3 hours ago after giving her statement." Martinez recalled the little girl's wide eyes as she'd asked if she could pet Rex before leaving. The dog, normally standoffish with strangers while working, had allowed the brief contact, seeming to understand the child's need for reassurance after her ordeal. Blackwood nodded, making notes on her small tablet with quick, efficient movements. "And no one has entered the structure yet?" "No. Chief Donovan ordered a hands-off approach until federal authorities arrived. Dr. Chen has been conducting non-invasive scans, but that's it." Martinez gestured toward the geologist, who was still working with her equipment at a safe distance from the hole, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her monitoring screens. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a convoy of unmarked black vehicles, their engines humming with quiet efficiency as they rolled into the park's main parking lot. They were followed by 2 large trucks bearing equipment, the government license, plates visible even in the dim light. The vehicles moved with coordinated precision, taking positions that suggested a pre-planned deployment rather than an ad hoc response. Men and women in specialized gear began unloading what appeared to be advanced scanning technology and protective equipment. Their movements were practiced and efficient, suggesting extensive training for just such situations. Some carried cases marked with hazard symbols Martinez recognized from his emergency response training, while others assembled what looked like a portable decontamination unit at the edge of the parking area. "Department of Energy," Blackwood explained, noticing Martinez's questioning look. "Special Containment Division." The implications of their presence sent a chill through Martinez. The Department of Energy was responsible for, among other things, nuclear materials and research. "Radiation risk?" he asked, unconsciously placing a protective hand on Rex's head. "Precautionary," she assured him, though something in her expression suggested there was more to the story. Her eyes didn't quite meet his, as she added, "Standard protocol for facilities of unknown purpose from this era. The Cold War produced many experimental installations with various potential hazards." Martinez noted her careful choice of words. Experimental installations. Potential hazards. The bureaucratic language that often concealed more serious concerns. Across the park, Dr. Chen was engaged in animated conversation with a group of newly arrived scientists, her gestures suggesting frustration or disagreement. Her usual methodical demeanor had given way to visible agitation as she pointed repeatedly at her equipment readings, shaking her head at whatever the newcomers were telling her. Chief Donovan stood nearby, his arms crossed defensively as a man in an expensive suit spoke to him with evident authority, occasionally gesturing toward the federal vehicles as if to emphasize a point. "Your chief is being informed that this is now a federal matter," Blackwood said, following Martinez's gaze. "Local emergency services will maintain the outer perimeter, but the investigation of the structure falls under our jurisdiction." Her tone suggested this was non-negotiable, a fact rather than a request for cooperation. "Under what authority?" Martinez asked, professional curiosity overriding his usual deference to federal agencies. In his 15 years with the department, he'd worked alongside federal authorities on several cases, but never seen such a rapid and comprehensive response, especially to what appeared to be an archaeological discovery rather than an active crime scene. Blackwood's smile was thin, barely reaching her eyes. "National security. The designation Project Kronos has triggered certain protocols." She paused, seeming to consider how much to reveal. "Let's just say there are watch lists for certain project names and designations from that era. When Dr. Chen's report mentioned the markings, several alerts were activated simultaneously across multiple agencies." Before Martinez could inquire further, a commotion at the perimeter drew their attention. A group of protesters had gathered near the main entrance to the park, their numbers growing as word spread through social media. They held hastily made signs demanding "public right to know" and "no more government secrets." Some had brought bullhorns and were leading chants that carried across the park, their voices a discordant chorus against the methodical activity of the emergency response. "That was fast," Martinez remarked, checking his watch. It was barely past midnight, yet already the crowd had organized enough to create professionally printed signs and establish a social media presence. Someone had clearly been prepared for something like this, or was remarkably efficient at mobilizing public response. "Social media," Blackwood replied grimly. "Nothing stays contained anymore." She touched her earpiece, listening to something Martinez couldn't hear before adding, "We're tracking several hashtags that are trending locally. The conspiracy theorists are already having a field day with this." As if to emphasize her point, a drone appeared overhead, its camera clearly aimed at the sinkhole and the surrounding activity. The small aircraft moved with purpose, suggesting professional operation rather than a curious hobbyist. Its lights blinked in the darkness as it hovered, capturing high-resolution footage of the scene below. Two federal agents immediately raised what looked like modified shotguns and fired. Instead of bullets, they released some kind of electromagnetic pulse that sent the drone tumbling from the sky, its lights flickering out as it crashed into the trees at the edge of the park. A cheer went up from some of the federal personnel, followed by renewed shouting from the protesters who had witnessed the takedown. "Counter-surveillance measures," Blackwood explained, seemingly unperturbed by the aggressive response. "We'll be establishing a no-fly zone shortly. The FAA has been notified, and all unauthorized aircraft will be intercepted." The night was growing increasingly surreal. The peaceful park Martinez had patrolled for years now, unrecognizable under the harsh lights and military-style occupation. The familiar paths where he had walked Rex during quiet evening shifts were now crowded with equipment and personnel, speaking in technical jargon that sounded more appropriate for a sci-fi movie than a small-town emergency response. Whatever lay beneath their feet was clearly more significant than a forgotten Cold War relic. His thoughts were interrupted by Rex suddenly rising to his feet, ears forward, body tense with alertness. The dog's posture had changed from passive vigilance to active alarm in an instant, his training evident in the controlled intensity of his reaction. "What is it, boy?" Martinez asked, instantly attentive to his partner's change in demeanor. Years of working together had taught him to trust the animal's instincts without hesitation. The dog's focus was directed toward the woods at the park's edge, the same area Martinez had thought he'd seen movement earlier. This time, Rex's posture wasn't merely alert, but actively alarmed, a low growl building in his throat. His hackles were raised, teeth slightly bared in warning rather than aggression. "Agent Blackwood," Martinez said quietly, his hand moving instinctively to the holster at his hip. "I think we have company." Blackwood followed his gaze, her hand moving subtly toward her weapon as she scanned the tree line. "Where?" Her voice had dropped to a near whisper, all business now as she shifted smoothly into a defensive posture that spoke of extensive field training. Before Martinez could answer, the floodlights illuminating the scene suddenly flickered, their steady glow faltering like candles in a draft. For a moment, the lights stabilized, then failed completely, plunging the park into darkness save for the emergency lights on the vehicles and the distant glow of the protesters' cell phones at the perimeter. In the momentary confusion, shouts of alarm rose from various points around the perimeter as people collided in the darkness or stumbled over equipment. "Generator failure," someone called out, followed by a series of urgent commands as personnel scrambled to restore power. Martinez felt Rex press against his leg, the dog's body vibrating with tension but maintaining his disciplined position. In the near darkness, other senses heightened. The smell of damp earth and ozone, the sound of hurried footsteps and urgent whispers, the feeling of something fundamental changing in the air around them. And then, as backup generators kicked in and light gradually returned to the scene, Martinez noticed something had changed. The hole, the entrance to the mysterious facility, was no longer empty. Where before there had been only darkness and broken earth, there was now movement. A figure stood at its edge, having somehow emerged from below, without anyone noticing in the darkness. The appearance was so sudden, so unexpected, that for a moment no one reacted, as if the collective mind of the emergency response team couldn't process this new development. Dressed in what appeared to be a pristine white hazmat suit, face obscured behind a reflective visor, the figure raised both hands in a universal gesture of non-aggression. The suit gleamed under the restored lights, unnaturally clean against the backdrop of dirt and debris surrounding the hole. "My name is Dr. Marcus Vega," a voice called out, slightly distorted through the suit's communication system, but clearly male, with a calm authority that cut through the chaos of the moment. "I am the current director of Project Kronos, and I believe we have much to discuss." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Federal agents drew weapons, shouting commands for the figure to lie down on the ground. Emergency personnel retreated to safe positions, some reaching for protective gear. Chief Donovan's voice rose above the others, demanding that his officers hold their positions but remain ready. As weapons were drawn and orders shouted, Martinez noticed something odd about the stranger's hazmat suit. It wasn't modern. The design appeared vintage, like something from decades past rather than contemporary protective gear. The joints were bulkier, the material different from the sleek containment suits used by modern hazard teams. It resembled the early spacesuits from NASA's Mercury program more than current biohazard protection. And emblazoned on the chest was a logo Martinez had never seen before. a stylized hourglass encircled by what appeared to be mathematical equations, with the year 1952 prominently displayed beneath it. The emblem was faded but intact, like a museum piece preserved behind glass rather than a working uniform that had seen active use. The same year that had been etched into the concrete ceiling of the structure. Despite the weapons trained on him, Dr. Vega remained perfectly still, hands raised, seemingly unperturbed by the hostile reception. "I understand your caution," he continued, his voice remarkably steady. "But I assure you, I pose no threat. I've been expecting this day for some time." Agent Blackwood stepped forward, her weapon drawn but pointed downward in a compromise between caution and diplomacy. "How did you get in there? This facility has been sealed for decades." A sound that might have been a laugh came through the suit's speaker. "Sealed? No, Agent. Not sealed. Operating. Continuously. Since its inception." There was a pause before he added, "Though I admit, we didn't anticipate our existence being revealed quite so dramatically. We have the dog to thank for that, I suppose." All eyes turned briefly to Rex, who maintained his alert posture, focused intently on the figure in the white suit. The dog showed no signs of aggression now, only intense interest, his earlier alarm apparently specific to whatever he had sensed in the woods rather than the appearance of Dr. Vega. "Step away from the edge slowly," Blackwood commanded, her voice carrying the weight of federal authority. "Remove your helmet so we can confirm your identity." "I'm afraid I can't do that just yet," Vega replied. "The atmospheric adjustment period requires approximately 30 minutes after ascension. Protocol is quite specific on this point." He gestured to his suit. "However, I can provide biometric confirmation through other means, if you'll allow me to access the external verification panel on my left arm." Blackwood hesitated, then nodded sharply. "Slowly. Any sudden movements, and my agents will respond accordingly." With deliberate movements, Dr. Vega lowered his right hand and used it to activate what appeared to be a control panel on his left forearm. The panel illuminated with a soft blue glow, displaying scrolling data and what looked like a fingerprint scanner. "If you'll have one of your technical personnel bring a secure device within range, I can transmit identification credentials that should match your historical records," Vega offered. "I believe the Department of Energy still maintains the legacy database for Project Kronos, despite the official termination of funding in 1971. This statement caused a visible reaction among the federal agents. Blackwood exchanged glances with one of the DOE scientists, who nodded almost imperceptibly before retrieving a specialized tablet from their equipment. As this exchange was taking place, Martinez became aware of movement at the perimeter of his vision. Rex had shifted his attention back to the woods, his ears twitching at some sound beyond human perception. Following his partner's gaze, Martinez scanned the tree line and caught a glimpse of what might have been a figure moving between the trunks, barely visible in the shadows beyond the floodlight's reach. "Agent Blackwood," he said quietly, not wanting to disrupt the tense standoff with Dr. Vega, but needing to alert her to the potential secondary threat. "We may have additional parties interested in this situation. Northeast corner in the woods." Blackwood didn't take her eyes off Vega, but she subtly touched her earpiece, presumably relaying the information to her team. Within moments, several agents began moving casually but purposefully toward the indicated area, their movements designed to appear routine rather than targeted. Meanwhile, the DOE scientist had approached Dr. Vega with a specialized tablet, maintaining a cautious distance as the device apparently connected wirelessly with the suit's control panel. The scientist studied the incoming data with growing astonishment, his professional composure cracking as he turned to Blackwood. "It's authentic," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The credentials match our deepest archived protocols, authorization codes that haven't been used in... He paused, double-checking the display. 47 years. A murmur ran through the gathered officials. Dr. Chen had abandoned her equipment to move closer, her scientific curiosity evidently overcoming her earlier caution. "That's impossible," she said, addressing Dr. Vega directly. "You can't possibly be from the original project team. The timeline doesn't match human lifespan." Through the reflective visor, it was impossible to see Vega's expression, but something in his posture suggested amusement. "Dr. Chen, I presume. Your ground-penetrating radar work was quite impressive. As for the timeline..." He paused, as if considering his words carefully. "That is precisely what we need to discuss. Project Kronos was never about building bunkers or weapon systems like so many other Cold War initiatives. Our focus was on something far more fundamental." Before he could elaborate, shouts erupted from the direction of the woods where Martinez had spotted movement. The sound of pursuit followed. Crashing undergrowth, calls for someone to stop, the distinctive sound of a taser being deployed. The commotion drew everyone's attention momentarily. Everyone except Dr. Vega, who remained perfectly still, as if he had expected this development as well. "Right on schedule," he remarked, the words barely audible through his suit's communication system. When Martinez looked back, he was startled to see that Vega was no longer alone. Two more figures in identical white suits had emerged from the hole, taking positions on either side of him with synchronized precision. Unlike Vega, they carried what appeared to be equipment cases, each marked with the same hourglass logo. "My colleagues, Dr. Eliza Tam and Dr. Jonah Reeves." Vega introduced them with a casual gesture, as if this were a conference meeting rather than a tense standoff. "We represent the current leadership of Project Kronos, and we're here to prevent what could become a significant temporal security breach." The new arrivals set down their cases and raised their hands in the same non-threatening gesture as Vega, creating a tableau that seemed both surreal and strangely formal. From the woods, the federal agents returned, escorting an elderly man in handcuffs. Despite his age, Martinez guessed mid-80s at least. The man walked with surprising vigor, his back straight, his eyes alert and calculating as they swept across the scene. When his gaze landed on the three figures in white suits, he stopped abruptly, his expression transforming from defiance to something more complex. Recognition, fear, and what might have been resignation. "Harold Chambers," Dr. Vega called out, his tone almost cordial. "Former security director for Project Kronos, 1968 to 1971. I was wondering when you would make an appearance." The old man's face drained of color. "You're not Vega," he said, his voice quavering slightly despite his evident attempt to maintain composure. "Marcus Vega would be over 100 years old by now." "And yet, here I stand," Vega replied, spreading his hands in a gesture that somehow conveyed a smile despite his hidden face. "Which brings us to the heart of the matter." He turned his attention back to Agent Blackwood and the assembled officials. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're about to discuss will challenge your understanding of physics, national security, and perhaps even human history. I suggest we move this conversation to a more secure location, away from civilian ears and unauthorized recording devices." He gestured toward the growing crowd of onlookers and protesters at the perimeter. Project Kronos was never decommissioned, merely relocated in a manner of speaking. The facility beneath your feet represents only the access point to something far more extensive and significant. something that has remained operational and advancing for over 70 years, despite official records suggesting otherwise. He paused, the reflective visor of his helmet turning toward the night sky above them, then back to the assembled officials. To put it simply, we don't just study time. We've learned to manipulate it. And now, thanks to an unexpected canine intervention, our work has become exposed at a most inconvenient moment in the continuum. A heavy silence fell over the scene, broken only by the distant chanting of protesters and the soft whir of equipment. In that moment of collective processing, Martinez felt the world tilt slightly beneath his feet. Not physically, but conceptually, as if the foundations of reality had shifted just enough to make everything familiar suddenly strange. Rex pressed against his leg, a warm, solid presence anchoring him to the concrete reality of the present moment. Even as Dr. Vega's words suggested that present might be a far more complex concept than any of them had previously understood. The secure conference room in the Willow Creek Police Department now housed local law enforcement, federal agents, and 3 individuals claiming to represent Project Kronos, a classified government project officially terminated decades ago. The scientists, Dr. Marcus Vega, Dr. Eliza Tam, and Dr. Jonah Reeves, had exchanged their hazmat suits for gray jumpsuits with the hourglass insignia. They appeared middle-aged, with Vega sporting salt and pepper hair and a deep tan that seemed inconsistent with life in an underground facility. Harold Chambers, the elderly man apprehended in the woods, sat handcuffed at the table's end, watching the scientists with a mixture of fear, anger, and reluctant awe. "Let's begin with basic verification," Agent Blackwood said. "You claim to be Dr. Marcus Vega, yet the Marcus Vega from the 1950s would be over 100 years old now." "Chronological age is surprisingly fluid in my line of work," Vega replied with a smile. He placed a small metallic disc on the table that projected holographic credentials showing him at various ages. Technology clearly beyond anything commercially available. "These could be faked," Blackwood noted without conviction. "They could," Vega agreed. "Which is why I've submitted to DNA testing, fingerprinting, and retinal scans. But perhaps more convincingly, I know things about Project Kronos that were never documented." He turned to Chambers. "For instance, I know that on July 8, 1969, Security Director Chambers implemented Protocol Janus without authorization. I know why he did it and what he discovered." "That's not possible," Chambers whispered. "Those records were destroyed." "Not records, Harold. Memory. I was there." "You're claiming time travel," Blackwood said flatly. "Not in the sense you're imagining from science fiction," Dr. Tam replied. "Reality is considerably more complex." Dr. Reeves explained. Project Kronos began investigating temporal anomalies detected during nuclear testing. By 1971, we had created a temporal research enclave, facility existing in a bubble of manipulated temporal flow. What has been 70 years for you has been nearly 2 centuries of continuous research for us. "That's impossible," Dr. Chen objected. "The energy requirements alone would be astronomical using conventional physics," Tam agreed. "But we don't use conventional physics." Chambers laughed harshly. "You still don't get it. They're here to contain the situation. Protocol Omega, right?" "Containment is part of our mission," Vega admitted. "The exposure of our access point creates temporal stability issues that could have far-reaching consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Martinez asked. "Imagine history as a tapestry," Vega replied. "Our work creates specialized threads, controlled deviations for studying temporal mechanics. The discovery of our facility introduces an unplanned variable, that could create a cascade effect. Temporal instability, affecting past and future events unpredictably. A technician entered with results confirming the scientists' biometric data matched archived records from the original Project Kronos personnel. Assuming what you're saying is true, Blackwood asked, what do you want from us? The exposure has created a witnessed event node. Too many observers and too much documentation for simple containment. Vega explained. We've chosen controlled disclosure with certain conditions and safeguards. Total control over the facility, classified status for everything, and hand-picked personnel allowed to know the truth. Chambers translated bitterly. More or less, Vega admitted. Just like in '69. Chambers spat. You decide what's responsible while the rest of us live with the consequences. The consequences of Protocol Janus were entirely of your making, Harold. Vega responded coldly. What happened to Anna was... Don't you dare say her name. Chambers lunged forward, face flushed with rage. Agent Blackwood called for a recess as Martinez watched the scientists with renewed interest. They moved with subtle synchronicity, suggesting centuries of collaboration, yet remained recognizably human. This is insane, Dr. Chen whispered to Martinez. Time manipulation violates every principle of physics I've studied. And yet their biometrics match, Martinez replied, stroking Rex's head. And that technology they brought is like nothing I've ever seen. Whatever the truth behind Project Kronos, they were standing at a threshold. The world after this revelation would be fundamentally different from the one that had existed before the ground in Willow Creek Park revealed its impossible secret.